Picture this, Elon replied, his voice steady but full of determination. Imagine if someone informed you hundreds of years before you were born exactly where you would be born, who your ancestors were, and even how you would die. Not only predictions that are imprecise, but also predictions that are specific. Now picture this happening more than 300 times instead of just once. He stopped for a while to allow that to register. And Jesus of Nazareth did exactly that. He fulfilled all of the more than 300 prophecies from the Old Testament that pointed straight to him. This includes predictions regarding his birth in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2. His heritage from the line of David, Isaiah 11:1, his suffering during the crucifixion, Psalm 22. Even his resurrection, Psalm 6:10. The odds of completing even a small number of these prophecies would be extremely unlikely, but he managed to fulfill all of them. Elon did not simply repeat the facts. He provided an interpretation. He explained it in a way that everyone could comprehend, highlighting the incredible odds. From a scientific or statistical point of view, the chances of any single person fulfilling merely 8 prophecies are 1/100 quadrillion. That's similar to covering the entire state of Texas with silver coins that are 2 feet deep and then asking a blindfolded person to find one specific coin on their first attempt. Everyone in the room was silent, each person thinking about the magnitude of what they had just heard. And Jesus was more than just a historical figure. Long before he was born, a divine plan was put into operation, and his life and acts were part of that plan. Elon grinned a little, knowing that his remarks had a lot of significance. He stated that this is only the beginning. Most people are unaware of the many aspects of Jesus that are not commonly known. Musk said, "We often think of Jesus as divine, which he was, but we sometimes forget the immense humanity he carried with him." For instance, hemadrosis is a rare disorder. At this point, the audience leaned in closer. Hematidrosis was a new concept to many of them. Hematidrosis is a disorder that occurs when the blood vessels in the skin break down and mingle with sweat due to excessive stress. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. The Bible states that Jesus was under such much stress and emotional turmoil just before his crucifixion that he started to sweat blood. Elon gazed out at the audience, his voice gentle yet persuasive. Can you picture how painful that would be? Not only are you aware that you're about to be tortured and executed, but you also have to bear the burden of the world's sins. Jesus was aware of what was going to happen and persisted. The audience was quiet once more, as if everyone could sense the suffering that Jesus had gone through. Here, Musk went on to say that this was not simply a man who was facing death. This was a man who was going through physical and emotional pain that was beyond our comprehension, and he was doing it for a reason that was bigger than any of us could ever understand. He took a moment to wait, allowing the weight of his last statement to sink in. Consider that. Jesus' death was not limited to being crucified. He went through a level of anguish that is unimaginable for most of us. And he did it for every one of us. Musk, with a smirk that suggested he knew something, added, "Now, let me tell you something interesting about Jesus that might surprise you. The Bible informs us that Jesus was not very attractive, which is different from the artistic depictions we are used to seeing." A number of people in the audience looked at each other in confusion. How is this possible? They had seen many paintings and statues that portrayed Jesus as a beautiful and majestic figure. Musk went on. Isaiah 53 also states that Jesus was not beautiful or majestic enough to draw us to him. He was not a king in the way that we usually conceive of kings. He did not stroll around in flowing robes, exuding an aura of power and authority. He appeared to be a typical dude. He did not have any physical characteristics that stood out. The audience quietly murmurs they considered this new way of looking at things. But wasn't that the whole point? Musk stated, Jesus comes to connect with us. He did not show up as a person who is arrogant or self-important. And he came to us as a regular person, just like the rest of us who lived and breathed the same air we do. Elon looked around the room and said that humility is what made him so powerful. He had the option of coming as a king with troops and riches, but he instead chose to come as a lowly servant, living a life that we could all relate to. He was able to relate to the average person in a manner that no one else could. Musk carefully walked back and forth on the stage and stated, for someone whose teachings have changed the world, Jesus never actually wrote anything himself. This revelation surprised many people in the audience. Is it possible that someone who has had such a huge impact on the lives of billions of people has never written down their words? That's correct, Musk responded. There are no books or writings that Jesus left behind. His disciples documented all he taught. They heard what he said, witnessed what he did, and then shared that information with others. His message was about more than just what was written on the page. That was about changing people's lives. He stopped speaking for a moment to give the listeners time to process this information. Don't you think it's fascinating Not a single word of scripture was written by the most influential teacher in history. Rather, he put his message into action, and it was so impactful that the people around him felt compelled to share it with the rest of the world. Musk was aware of the significance of what he was saying, and he grinned as he talked. It wasn't about putting things in writing. Jesus' emphasis on building relationships and interacting with people directly is the reason his teaching has lasted for thousands of years. The audience nodded in agreement, realizing that often the most impactful teachings are not found in books, but rather in the deeds that people take. Elon's explanation made them want to know more and piqued their interest in the deeper facts surrounding Jesus. They will soon find out that this was only the beginning. There was a lot more information about Jesus that would have left them even more amazed. Elon Musk paused for a while, allowing the audience to reflect on the final statement he had made. After that, he went on to discuss another interesting aspect about Jesus that is frequently overlooked. While many of us view Jesus as just a humble carpenter, he was actually much more than that. Jesus was a teacher who spoke multiple languages, including Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. And the crowd appeared to be surprised. Jesus, a carpenter from Nazareth, was able to speak several languages. Elon indicated that Aramaic was the language Jesus probably spoke on a daily basis, both with his disciples and with the average people he encountered on the streets. He would have been very knowledgeable in Hebrew, as it was the language of the scriptures, which were the holy books of his time. He read from the Hebrew scriptures in synagogues and explained their meanings to the people who were there. Musk went on to say, and then there's Greek. During the period that the Roman Empire ruled the region, Greek was the language used for trade and government. It is possible that Jesus was able to speak enough Greek to connect with people from a variety of backgrounds. This would have been essential for getting his message out to others beyond his immediate environment. Elon took a moment to let the impact sink in. Therefore, Jesus was not simply an ordinary person living in a remote village. He was able to interact with people from many backgrounds, including local Jews, Roman authorities, and even foreign traders who were passing through Palestine. His lessons were intended for all people, no matter what language they spoke or where they came from. As the audience listened, they started to understand a more complicated and dynamic vision of Jesus, one that was different from the usual representations. Elon was creating a picture of a man who was both approachable to the average person and able to navigate the world at large. Elon replied, his voice getting a little louder, and here's something that is unlike anything else. God made his voice heard to Jesus 3 times during Jesus' life, providing him with affirmation. Picture yourself hearing God's voice speaking out loud, publicly confirming your identity and your actions. The audience was captivated, listening intently to every word. Elon went on to say that the first time was when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. Of the heavens opened up, and a voice said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Matthew 3:17, as soon as Jesus was baptized. Can you picture yourself seeing something like that? Musk explained that the second time was during the Transfiguration. Jesus led Peter, James, and John to the top of a high mountain, and while they were standing there, Jesus' appearance altered. His face was bright like the sun, and his clothes were a brilliant white. And God's voice spoke again from a cloud, saying, "This is my Son whom I love. I am well pleased with him." Listen to him. Matthew 7:5. As Elon explained these miraculous experiences, he could tell that the gathering was amazed. Just before Jesus was crucified, God spoke for the last time that anybody could hear. In John 12:28, Jesus appealed to God, asking him to glorify his name. God replied, saying, "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." Musk captivated his audience with every word, helping them to see how remarkable Jesus' life was. God officially acknowledged Jesus as his Son and the Messiah on 3 separate occasions. No other person in history has been confirmed by the voice of God in this manner. What about Jesus' ability to control life and death? Elon asked a rhetorical question and then moved on to the next topic. While many people are aware of Jesus' resurrection, not everyone knows that he brought 3 people back to life before his own resurrection. This statement sparked a commotion in the room as several people began to nod their heads in agreement. Elon suggested that we begin with Lazarus. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, and when Jesus arrived, everyone felt it was too late. But Jesus simply commanded, "Lazarus, come out," and the dead man stepped out of his tomb alive and well. John 11:44. As Musk went on, his voice became more and more intense. Then there was Jairus' daughter, a young girl who was raised by Jesus when he told her to get up. Mark 5:21-43. Finally, there was the widow's son at Nain. Jesus witnessed a funeral procession and felt sympathy for the mother who was mourning. He touched the bier and instructed the youngster to get up, and the boy did. Luke 7, even 17, Elon's statements had a profound impact. These were not simply miracles for the sake of show. They were acts of compassion that demonstrated Jesus' love and power over even the worst adversary of all, of death. As Musk began to discuss the following topic, his tone got serious. The moment of Jesus' death was one of the most impactful occasions in his story. An astonishing event occurred when Christ took his final breath on the cross. Matthew 20:51 states that the veil in the temple was ripped in half from the top to the bottom. The audience was completely captivated and did not make a sound. In the Jewish temple, there was a large, thick curtain that separated the Holy of Holies, which was where God's presence was, from the rest of the building. The Holy of Holies was exclusively accessible to the high priest, and even he could only enter it once a year. Elon continued, but when the curtain was torn at the moment of Jesus' death, it represented the end of the separation between God and humanity. We can now connect with God directly through Jesus. There are no more mediators or walls. Jesus opened a way for all of us. He stopped for a moment and gazed at the audience. That's profound, isn't it? One man's death changed the course of history, and in doing so, he removed the boundaries that had kept humanity distant from God. We have discussed the power of Jesus, but I would like to draw attention to something that is just as essential. Musk stated, lowering his voice as he moved on to a more personal subject, that he had a lot of emotional depth. In addition to being a miracle worker with great ability, Jesus was also a person of great compassion. He experienced the pain and suffering of the people around him. Jesus wept, John 11:85 is one of the shortest and most moving verses in the Bible. Elon allowed the simplicity of the verse to linger in the air for a minute. He cried at the grave of his companion Lazarus, demonstrating that even though he had the ability to bring the dead back to life, he nevertheless experienced the burden of human sadness. He was not indifferent or lacking in emotion. He was completely engaged with the suffering of other people. However, Jesus did not only display grief. He also showed compassion for the throngs that followed him, since he knew they were like sheep without a shepherd, Matthew 9:36. Even showed righteous fury when he perceived injustice in the temple, throwing out the money changers who were taking advantage of the people, as stated in John 2:17. Elon's voice became more powerful. Jesus was not aloof or indifferent. He felt all of the feelings that humans experience, including sadness, happiness, anger, and love, and he formed connections with people in a way that was very intimate. Elon continued on, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. There are more than 500 people who saw Jesus alive after he died, making his resurrection one of the most well-documented events in history. The audience was spellbound. In 1 Corinthians 15:6, Paul states that Jesus showed himself to more than 500 people at the same time. These were not just close friends or disciples who might have had a vested interest in preserving the myth. They were ordinary folks who had no incentive to lie. Musk's eyes moved over the room. This number of witnesses would be able to testify in any modern court of law. The resurrection was neither a story nor a legend that was created throughout time. It was a real event that hundreds of people saw, which is why it forms the foundation of the Christian religion. As time went on, the crowd became increasingly interested and excited to hear the rest of what Musk had to say about the guy whose life had a lasting impact on the world. Elon Musk took a deep breath as he got ready to expand the argument to a larger audience. He had discussed the richness of Jesus' life, including his miracles and the emotional and spiritual importance of his life. Now was the time to emphasize the lasting impact that the teachings of Jesus have had on the globe. Elon continued, his voice becoming more even. Let's discuss the influence of Jesus. Even after 2,000 years since his death and resurrection, Jesus' impact is still felt today. It's only expanded, reaching every continent, culture, and civilization. The foundation of what we refer to as Western civilization was built on his ideas, which influenced the development of ethics, law, and human rights. The audience nodded, and many of them were clearly thinking about how important the message was. Elon went on to say that the notion that the impoverished, the meek, and the merciful are blessed was considered to be radical back then. He instructed us to love those who oppose us and to pray for those who mistreat us. Those statements have been repeated for hundreds of years. As he spoke, Musk walked back and forth on the stage. His message of forgiveness, love, and grace has inspired revolutions in thought, including initiatives to eradicate slavery and the formation of contemporary charities. Christian teachings, which all date back to Jesus himself, are the foundation for institutions such as hospitals, orphanages, and humanitarian groups. He stopped for a while to let the impact of his words be fully understood. Even those like Mahatma Gandhi, who was not a Christian, acknowledged that the teachings of Jesus, especially the principle of turning the other cheek, influenced his ideology of nonviolent resistance. The crowd sat in silence, thinking on the vastness of Jesus' impact, which had extended over centuries, cultures, and every aspect of existence. Elon Musk changed the subject when he started to talk about Jesus, a person who is relevant to all people, regardless of when or where they live or what culture they belong to. Elon added with excitement, what is really interesting is that the message of Jesus is not limited to just one group of people. He was not only for the Jews who lived in Palestine during the first century, nor was he only for Christians who lived in Rome centuries later. His message is relevant to everyone. He addressed everyone regardless of their wealth, age, or gender. His kindness and grace are limitless. Musk and the audience consider it. Jesus was born in a little hamlet in a location that most nations considered unimportant, but he became a person whose impact extended over empires, languages, and centuries. People from all around the world, regardless of their background, nationality, or culture, seek to Jesus as their God. He went on to say that there are people who feel a connection to Jesus in rural communities in Africa, busy cities in Europe, the Americas, Asia, and even in isolated islands in the Pacific. His message of hope, redemption, and love is something that every human being can relate to. Regardless of your location or identity, the teachings of Jesus transcend time and space to communicate with you. Elon explained how Jesus crossed time and culture, and the audience listened closely, captivated by his explanation. It was becoming increasingly obvious that Jesus' life was more than merely a historical occurrence. It was a force that had been continuously changing the globe and would continue to do so. Elon added, raising his voice, "Now let's not forget one of the most remarkable aspects of Jesus' life, the number of prophecies he fulfilled." A low sound of agreement spread through the room. Musk was exploring a topic that many people knew about, but only a small number of people understood completely. Musk said, in a voice full of confidence, that there are more than 300 prophecies in the Old Testament that refer to the arrival of the Messiah, and that Jesus fulfilled each and every one of them. Micah 5:2 states that the prophet Micah predicted that he would be born at Bethlehem, and that is exactly where he was born. According to the prophecy in 2 Samuel 16, he was a descendant of King David. Isaiah 53 predicted the way he would die, being wounded for our trespasses hundreds of years before Jesus was born. Elon took a moment to let that sink in. These predictions are not vague. They are specific. They make references to Jesus that cannot be ignored. He looked around the room and noticed a group of people who seemed really interested. It is extremely unlikely that a single person could fulfill all of these prophecies. According to mathematicians, the chances of one person fulfilling just 8 of these prophecies is 1 in 100 quadrillion. The audience was shocked by the astonishing figure. However, Musk went on to say that Jesus accomplished more than 8. He completed more than 300. That is not a coincidence. It is divine intervention. As Elon neared the conclusion of his argument, he stated, "Now, I would like to finish by discussing a topic that is frequently ignored in conversations about Jesus, his ethical principles." Musk began by shifting his weight. The principles that Jesus taught are the basis for what we now think of as fundamental moral standards. Matthew 7:12 states, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." This is known as the Golden Rule, and it is a principle that goes beyond religion. It is a principle that is universally accepted and has been embraced by cultures all across the world. He went on to say that the teachings of Jesus were a threat to the moral fabric of his time. He encouraged people to forgive not just once, but 70 times, 7 times, Matthew 18:2. He emphasized that it is not enough to avoid murder or adultery. You must also avoid feelings of hatred or lust in your heart. He changed the way people thought about what it meant to live a good life. Must stop for a moment to highlight the next point he was going to make. The moral code that Jesus established was not simply a set of rules to obey. It was about changing the heart. It was about being so full of love, compassion, and grace that it spontaneously overflows into every action you conduct. The audience could sense the significance of what he was saying. Musk was not just portraying Jesus as a historical figure. He was also portraying him as the greatest moral teacher whose impact continues to mold the ethics of people and communities all over the world. Elon Musk began to wrap up his statement by addressing the main question of the argument. Is Jesus simply a man, or is he something greater? He turned his gaze to the audience after looking straight at Pope Francis, who had been listening with a lot of curiosity. The evidence is overwhelming. Jesus was more than a mere human being. He was a rebel, a teacher, a miracle worker, and a person whose impact extended beyond every conceivable border. As he shared his last thought, Musk's face became more kind. Regardless of whether you think Jesus was the Son of God, a prophet, or just a great moral teacher, it is undeniable that he had a significant impact on the trajectory of human history. Billions of people continue to be inspired by his life, death, and resurrection. This is not only because of who he was, but also because of what he represents: hope, redemption, and love. Elon Musk took a step back after saying those last words, allowing the weight of his argument to sink into the hearts and minds of everyone who was there. The discussion had reached its climax, and the audience was aware that they had just watched an interaction that would be remembered forever regarding the most important person in human history. Thank you so much for joining me in exploring this remarkable and profound story. I hope it has given you a deeper understanding of the extraordinary life and legacy of Jesus and the incredible way it continues to shape our world. These are the stories that remind us of the power of hope, redemption, and love. If you found this story inspiring, thought-provoking, or simply worth sharing, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Velvet Sovereigns, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on our next journey into history, humanity, and the moments that define us. Stay tuned for even more incredible stories that bring the past to life, connected to our present, and inspire us to create a better future. Until next time, take care, and thank you for being part of this amazing community.